Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Leadership Institute's February Wednesday Wake Up Club breakfast. As I generally say at the start of these meetings, we live in interesting times, and that is, in these particular times, an understatement. These times are indeed interesting. And one thing personal that I can share with you, which is I take it as very good news, is that yesterday I got my vaccination for the Red Chinese virus, my first shot, and I'm happy to have it. People my age tend to feel that, and have felt for some while, that there were arrows pointed at us, and I'm happy at the quick development of these vaccines and pleased that I have been able to benefit from them. I encourage all of you to live tweet today's event. You can use hashtag WWCB. Despite the global pandemic, 14,875 individuals received training from your Leadership Institute last year, and 8,129 of them completed sufficient in-person and online training to become designated Leadership Institute graduates. And this was achieved primarily by providing last year a whopping average of 41.9 hours of live training online each week. Since 1979, your Leadership Institute has trained 230,788 students. At the end of this event, you'll be redirected to the training schedule on our Leadership Institute website, and there you will find all of our upcoming trainings, and new ones are being added almost every day. I ask you to take a moment to review those schools and consider attending one of them or sending a friend to a Leadership Institute training. There'll be a chance to ask questions at the end of the talk. I'm going to have to leave you at noon to chair another event, but I urge you for this breakfast to use the Zoom Q&A function to submit a question should you have one. It's my pleasure to present to you for a brief presentation about our programs, Cody Hewitt. Cody recently joined the Leadership Institute as the Studio Training and Video Production Coordinator. In this position, he manages our studios, supports Leadership Institute training, and our live streaming events, which are many. Previously, Cody worked at Colorado Christian University, where he received his master's degree in organizational leadership. As a Colorado native, as I too happen to be, Cody enjoys hiking, snowboarding, and disc golf, whatever that is. Maybe you can explain what disc golf is to me. Cody, you're on.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Morton. Disc golf is golfing, but with discs. And instead of throwing it into holes, you're throwing it into chain baskets that are all around. So very popular in Colorado. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me here. I'm so excited to share with you what the studios team has been up to. Special thanks to our amazing donors. 2020 has been a year of great change and a year of growth here at the Leadership Institute. Last year, we took our YouTube page from 500 subscribers to 5,000. We also increased the amount of time people watch videos by 1,000%. The studios department has also added a brand new studio podcast, which I'm going to actually show you guys. So podcasting, the brand new studio podcast is being added to our arsenal of production rooms. Podcasting is one of the fastest growing mediums for mass communication, and the newest podcast room and corresponding equipment will help us train the next generation in our mission to increase the number of effectiveness of conservative activists. As you guys look in here, Ms. Tiffany Roberts is actually currently in here using it for today's training. The new studio is equipped with state-of-the-art recording equipment and is currently being used. The podcast studio has already been used numerous times to host online trainings, record upcoming trainings, and to record podcasts in. Podcasts are definitely on the rise, and it's a great way to communicate with audiences. Due to COVID, many in-person events had to be canceled, and in spite of that, the Leadership Institute was still able to continue on our mission. Last year, we ran live streams for Ann Coulter on her tour, as well as just 2 weeks ago in Studio B, or the James Fishback Ballroom studio, we filmed Jeannie Mancini giving her regards and remarks for the March for Life. So that was really great to be able to help them out and all of that. So I think that that is all I have to report on, and without further ado.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Cody. I appreciate it. Happy to have you here with us. Video production here at the Leadership Institute is a necessity for our trainings and messaging and fundraising. And it is thanks to the Leadership Institute's generous and loyal donors that the Studios division is able to exponentially increase the reach and effectiveness of Leadership Institute's mission. And now it is my great pleasure to present to you our featured speaker. I've gotten to the point where all of my old friends are old. And Don Devine is one of my oldest friends, at least in terms of duration. We have fought shoulder to shoulder on many battles for conservative principles, many different battlefields, many different locations. He is an outstanding person. Dr. Devine is the Grucock Senior Scholar at the Fund for American Studies. He served as President Ronald Reagan's director of the Office of Personnel Management during President Reagan's first term in office. During that time, the Washington Post labeled Dr. Don Devine as Reagan's, quote, terrible swift sword of the civil service, because he was cutting bureaucrats and reducing billions in spending. Today, Don Devine travels the country teaching constitutional leadership seminars to young people and speaking to groups about reviving the Constitution, saving the marriage between libertarianism and traditionalism. He is also a regular columnist for Newsmax Insiders, The American Spectator, The Imaginative Conservative, and the Library for Law and Liberty. Before and after his government service, Devine was an academic, teaching 14 years as an associate professor of government and politics at the University of Maryland, and for a decade as a professor of Western civilization at Bellevue University. Don is a columnist and the author of 10 books, including his most recent book, which was released just last week. The book is entitled The Enduring Tension, Capitalism and the Moral Order. He served as an advisor to President Reagan from 1976 to 1985, to Senator Bob Dole from 1988 to 96, and to Steve Forbes between 1998 and 2000. Again, I encourage you to post questions using and he will have time to answer some of those questions at the end. Again, I'm going to have to leave this at noon to chair another meeting, but Deirdre Hackelman will take over chairing. But it is now my great pleasure to present to you one of the great founding fathers of the conservative movement, Dr. Don Devine.
Oh, thank you very much, Morton. Morton and I really do go back to the beginnings. But you know, I was a professor, and somehow this guy Ronald Reagan, and before him a guy named Bill Buckley and Barry Goldwater came along, and I'm teaching and writing books, and all of a sudden I get sucked into politics. I remember when Ronald Reagan called me after we won in 1980, and he said, "Don, I got a job for you." I said, "What is it?" He said, "I want you to be the head of the Office of Personnel Management, OPM." My son used to call it opium. I said, "Well, kind of, what do you want me to do? That's kind of a funny job to give a guy who kind of a libertarian-leaning conservative, the head of the bureaucracy." He says, "Well, I got a good sense of humor." I said, "Well, what do you want me to do?" I said, "I want you to cut back 100,000 non-defense employees. I want you to make them work harder, and I want you to cut their bloated benefits." And I said, "Well, thanks, going to make a lot of friends in this job." He said, and I came out that I didn't make many friends. They called me Reagan's Rasputin of the reduction in force when we were separating people. But it was a great opportunity, and Ronald Reagan was just such a great man. The picture on back of me now shows when he was in the hospital after he got shot. I mean, that's really how he showed America what a courageous guy he was. And more important, he produced results. He created 25 years of prosperity for America, really turned the world around. 50 countries said that they learned from him on how to run government. But the different thing to me about Ronald Reagan is Ronald Reagan came in with a sense of history. He had what he called the great adventure of Western civilization, and that his success was in part because of that idea. And what was that idea? That the basic thing he understood is that the progressive movement had put America off the track to its sound historical development. A guy named Woodrow Wilson, president of Princeton University, president of the United States, he went to Europe, and he discovered what Europe was doing. They were brought up in a system where power was divided, but they were bringing it together in what we call the divine right of kings, that they claimed that the only one they had to be responsible to was God, and most of them didn't even really believe in God. But he went over there with the idea of learning from them, and he came back and wrote a book I had to read in graduate school about the problem with America is it divides power rather than bringing power together to do good. And he was so successful in that he started a dozen of the academic societies in political science, public administration, economics, changed elite opinion in America that the idea was to bring power together. And that's exactly what happened in American history over almost a century now. We've been moving further and further in that direction. Next one. And I think we're now at the end. Well, what is an old Reaganite? What do you care what he says in a prediction? There's a professor, the top public administration person in the country, who said, it's over. It can't work. The bureaucracy has 50 to 70 degrees between the guy who makes the decisions at the secretary level and when it hits the street with ordinary human being. It can't communicate. It's got to fall. And how do we know that? Donald Trump proved it. Donald Trump took that feeling the country understood that America was on the wrong track. And now we have Joe Biden, who's going to prove it, because he's going to try to pass all of these laws that don't work. And the bureaucracy doesn't know how to do them. And that's where we are today. I think the end of an era. I mean, almost a century. It's getting worse over time. It was not so far off at the very beginning. Wilson himself was restricted by a conservative Congress. But we've reached the end now. Experts realize that the biggest machine engine that started under Wilson, the Federal Reserve System, it doesn't know how to solve the problems anymore. It's got so much debt. So we've got to start, go back and rethink things. You know, we've gotten lazy too. We get too much slogans from both sides. What we have to do and go back and look at this great adventure that Ronald Reagan told was what made America different from everybody else and made it so successful. And that's what I try to do in the book. The basic point here, and you've been sent out these slides I'm doing, and you'll be able to look at them closer because I don't have that much time here. But the basic idea is that we came from a history that goes back to two great founts of looking different at it. All the world was the same up until two great civilizations had different ways of looking at things. Next, first is Athens, the rise of philosophy, Plato, Socrates' idea that there's something behind what we see, that there's a force there. He didn't quite have the force, but he knew there was something beyond what we saw immediately, what he called the shadow, and that we could learn by trying to go back to these things. So the rise of reason and thought was when, unfortunately, it ended pretty quickly. We know that Alexander the Great started the empire period of American history, and that flame came up, died. The next flame, and really the only other flame historically, came out of the Middle East, a guy named Abraham, and then his insight that there was something particular behind it. Socrates had the idea there was something there. Abraham said there was a creator, there was something there of more substance. Moses, he brings it into a civilization, a period of judges where they didn't even have really a government at all. The idea that freedom is important. It's important because God gave us the freedom even to disobey him. What an incredible idea that you could disobey the one who created you. Then, unfortunately, Israel started going to kings. God told them not to, but they did anyway. They paid for it. They built a great temple, but Rome came along, and another empire ended this first spear of civilization, this Western civilization. It doesn't really mature until Europe, Rome falls. This great institution was forever the empire. it fell to nomads and had to be the insights of Socrates and Abraham had to be put in a different. A voice comes out and challenges the whole idea of empire. It says, "Render to Caesar what's Caesar, and to God what's God." It takes this cosmological, we call it, the idea that that life, reality is just one mass of knowledge that we pick up from our culture. But this says there's something serious behind it. And what this chart shows in back of us, this is a thing by a United Nations related institution that they gathered all the empires and modern governments and put it all together and tried to figure out when each had different cultures. And you'll see at the beginning, in the year zero, all of the cultures in the world were pretty much at the same economic level. But in Europe, Europe takes off. That's that blue thing there. That takes off on wealth, that per capita wealth. And they did it a crazy way. They didn't give all power to the emperor or the king in England. It was restricted with Magna Carta. In Europe, the Holy Roman Empire, as even Voltaire said, was neither holy nor Roman nor empire. It was a federation. And in those kinds of governments, commerce flowered. Power was divided between lords and commons, church and state, local and national. Divided power worked. The Magna Carta was kind of the culmination of this. Ronald Reagan and great theorists like Frederick Hayek pointed out. But good things come to an end, unfortunately. There was a great depression, plague, and disrupted society. And this idea of empire came back to Europe after being out of it for hundreds of years. But something good happened. Next one. As this power was growing in Europe, it escaped this idea of this Western civilization, the Magna Carta. In effect, they kind of had the Magna Carta in their pockets when they came over here, and they recreated the civilization of Europe. Next one. In America, with tremendous variety over here. The colonies were so different, from Puritans in the north to Virginia, Anglicans who fought each other in the Civil War in England. They had Quakers in Pennsylvania, Catholics in Maryland, other Protestant minority religions, Roger Williams in Rhode Island. It created a diversity of institutions, and yet good commerce between them until the next thing. As England put together, they fought this divine right kingship longer than most, but they came and they finally resolved power, and they were putting central control over England. Then they came over and said, hey, let's do it to our colonies too, all right? What do we said? drop dead. All right, we declared independence, and we came back, and we recreated Magna Carta in the Constitution, except even better. It was what made America great, and we have to go back and study this great history and this great Constitution of ours. That is what divided power and allowed us to conquer. Unfortunately, this is your problem. You know, I'm in my 80s, all right? I'm not going to be around to fix this. You are. That's why I like to go out and speak to younger people. The welfare state is failing, all right? And it's been patched together. And I say, I'm convinced it's going to fall apart in the next 4 years under President Biden. And socially, no self-evident truths. I mean, that is the fact that you are facing, and there's no simple solution to this thing. Next one, and that's again why I wrote this book. We've got to go back and look at our history, a philosophy that made us different, the economics that made us different, the moral system that made us so different, going back to Athens and Jerusalem and Christianity and the whole development of moral thing that made our citizenry great. Three of my big heroes are back of me, Frederick Hayek, Bill Buckley, who started much of this, and of course Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan put the whole story together as he was so good in doing these things. And Morton worked for him as well as I did. I know how unique a person was. He put the whole great history that made America in a couple of words: God, family, freedom, neighborhood, work. That is a balance that can simplify our whole civilization. And thanks for having me, and be happy to answer any questions anyone might have.
Okay, there are a few questions. I encourage people to post questions in the Q&A function here on Zoom. One of the attendees said, Don, what inspired you to write this book, and what impact do you hope it will have?
Well, as I said, I mean, to me, the most important thing is to get people to think about this, not necessarily to agree with it, although I hope they could agree with it, but really to go back and think of these issues. We're so used to throwing slogans around both sides, and we got away from the idea that we have a philosophy, a way of thinking about it. What Ronald Reagan called fusionism, this idea that you need both freedom and a tradition, moral tradition. That's really what created modern conservatism, and so influenced Reagan. Ronald Reagan specifically said he got it from Frederick Hayek. He was very involved with Bill Buckley, read his magazines, was a personal friend. What we need to do is to go back and just think through these things and really kind of look at the whole question a little differently. We made some mistakes, even philosophically, not big ones, but ones that have hurt us. I think the biggest one is we were against government, and we were, because the central government took over so much of government. But we're for federalism. That's what the Constitution's about. We're for local government. When the great Alexis de Tocqueville came over and tried to find out what made America tick, it was voluntary association of local government. He was sent over by the French government to explain how national government worked locally. He said, but the national government worked locally by letting it free and let it do its own thing and have different solutions come up different places and not try to force everything down a person's neck. And that's why America is so great and predicted to be great, although we also predicted that if we didn't keep that philosophy, that way of looking at things, that we could lose it. And I'm afraid we're getting close to that now. And that's why I think we need to think through this and what can we do different, but still drawing from the great treasury that is our tradition.
Here's a question from John Sindel. He says, hello, Don. I doubt that we'll ever see another Reagan, but can you name up-and-coming conservative political leaders who, like the great communicator, can communicate conservative principles to the general population in a broadly appealing manner?
Well, the short answer is no. I don't know. And there are a lot of people. What we need more than a Reagan, in my opinion, though, is the ones that Reagan learned from. We need a deep intellectual like Frederick Hayek. We need someone who can communicate philosophy in ways at least the way the better educated can understand it, like Frank Meyer or William Buckley. We need somebody who can put it in terms that everybody can understand, like Ronald Reagan did. We need a bunch of people, you know. Really, the idea of a savior beyond Jesus isn't what we're about. We're about trying to build community, free communities, families, neighborhoods. That's what we need to do. A lot of it has to come from the bottom. Many of the intellectuals are saying that, focusing on that. But it also has to come through thinking and morality. I don't think there's one hero. That isn't what Western philosophy has been about. In fact, the ones that have been that way have tended to lead us in the wrong direction. I think people listening to this podcast, they're the future. You're the ones. It's up to you. My generation, it's too late. Do what Reagan did. Read. Ronald Reagan was not an A student, but Ronald Reagan read. You know, again, I mentioned it earlier, but I think he is so different from the other presidents we've had recently because he read deeply. He understood things. He used the word synthesis in a speech. I said, where did he get that idea? I mean, he's a politician, and everybody I told about that, I said, well, one of his speechwriters. Well, I went personally to all the speechwriters, and I asked them, how did this word get in this talk, fusion? and synthesis tension out of these words. Not one of them knew what I was talking about. All right, this came from Reagan himself. You can't have a real leader, in my opinion, unless they're well read. You know, we had the example of George W. Bush, where supposedly, I don't know if it's true or not, but if it's a powerful statement. If it is, that his top advisor made him start reading books when he was in the White House. I mean, come on, that's too late. You've got to do that now. Have that in your background, as Ronald Reagan did, and that carries you through. Just throwing slogans around, hating the other person, that doesn't work. You need a deep personal philosophy of government, of life, of everything. And you're not a real leader unless you have that, in my opinion.
Don, let me ask a question. You talk about the need for a firm philosophical founding and being wide read. There are a lot of people who are here with you today, and they would, I think, appreciate your advice. What is a handful of books that are easily accessible to reasonably intelligent people, not books that are jam-packed with difficult academic jargon, but what are the fundamental books that you would recommend for people to read in order to help build that philosophical foundation?
Well, this is going to be real easy to answer because of the list you put together, and I assume you still distribute it. I haven't seen
yes.
it. Yeah, okay, that's the answer. And maybe what you could do, Morton, is send that list out to the people who are on this call. Those are the ones I would start with. A very sound list. I don't know if you have mine on it, but add it first.
We have
Before you
26
send
books.
it out.
I'm considering this new book to be book number 27. Anybody interested in that booklet, which we give to Leadership Institute graduates, can access it online. The booklet is called Read to Lead, and you Google those words and you'll be brought to the Leadership Institute website where that booklet is available. But thank you for the praise for my list.
And I promise your audience this wasn't set up.
No. Except that I asked the question. This is
Well, maybe it was. Maybe you were going, but anyway, that's great.
all right. This is a question from Walter. He says, I grew up under Poland's communist system, and I believe the USA Constitution, freedom of mankind, and that makes opportunities to all. He asks, why, as Americans, do we not stress more and educate new generations of Americans that the free market system with good common sense government regulations is the best system in the world? Why don't we do more of that?
Well, the answer is very simple: is that we can't get conservatives in people who believe in that in universities. Part of this progressive revolution was to take over the university. I don't mean it was one little cabal, but it was widespread. As I mentioned earlier, Woodrow Wilson started the main academic institutions in the United States and convinced our leaders, the elite in our society, that these weren't the right audience when Robert Bork, who was a jurist, he was voted down to be on the Supreme Court. a very pessimistic view of Western civilization. And he had just given a talk on how Western civilization is doomed. And after it was over, some young man stood up in the audience and he said, well, I don't know how you can be so negative because if you look around, the only ones having children are more religious people. And so the long term, we're going to win. So Bork hesitated for a minute and he said, you're going to send them to college? That is the problem, right? Good people brought up well with education, their family, private school people go to 90+% of the colleges here, and the professors believe their job is to teach them progressivism rather than Western history. When I was young, when I was the age of most of your audience, Western civilization was a required course. You couldn't escape Socrates. Courses in Western civilization, again, were required. That's the problem. And we've tried many times to try to do it. We're going to have to rebuild a whole different system. And we are doing that in a small way, but we have to do it in a very big way. One of the things I tried to convince the people who run the Heritage Foundation that they need to create a university, in effect. There are good places like Hillsdale College and some others. But we have to build a whole structure of institutions to teach these great values. And again, de Tocqueville, who was really some ways so wise about the future, he predicted that if we don't have regular ways of understanding what our civilization is about and how we got there, we're going to lose it. And unfortunately, that's where we are. Somebody out there start a university. They started Middle Ages. They just had 2 or 3 people. Socrates, had a couple of dozen. We still remember Socrates. Really small groups changed Western civilization for bad. In the Soviet Union, they had a dozen people. Christianity only had a dozen, and one of them sold out totally, and the rest of them were cowards at the beginning. We need that kind of understanding and belief and passion. The ideals that built Western civilization are great ideals, and we've got to, in any way we can, promote them and advance them. We'll either have to go around those colleges, or maybe people are going to grow sick of being fed pablum in colleges rather than serious learning. Let's hope and pray for that.
We have a couple of questions which are not at all surprising, where people are asking different versions of the question, what is to be done? The first is from Barbara Bowie Whitman. She says, from the end of World War II onward, the communist objective was to take us over by taking over the press and our education system. It seems they have succeeded, and that one fundamental accomplishment was to be sure that students did not learn the story and the basis of our founding. With so much power in the hands of the bad guys at this juncture, how do we fight back in the near as well as the long term?
Yeah, that's the question. this generation is facing incredible problems. All the means of communication are in the hands of those who are against Western civilization. There are exceptions to some degree or other. I still have Wall Street Journal, but it's about the only big circulation newspaper. We still have some colleges. There are things, but what we have to do is build those that work. Support the ones that are there. Send your children there. For many years, I taught at the University of Maryland, and people would come up and ask me, where should I send my children? What are the best schools to go to? I said, send them near home, all right? So that they can still have your influence. I still believe in that. Talk to your children about what they're learning. I mean, we've gotten maybe too lazy in America. For so much of our history, we did teach these great ideas. And we got to, and start with your family, start with you. If you are well educated, you are one step in the right direction. And again, it's not going to be easy. You're right. The big institutions are controlled on the other side, and the media. And the Washington Post, which I read every day, is very difficult. It's so opinionated. It has nothing to do with traditional journalism. Hopefully people are getting, I mean, you can see people really, the media is one of the least supported of the institutions in America for a good reason. But what we have to do is we have to go out and invent new institutions that can take their place. And people are doing it all over the country. And we don't know, somebody has some version of Wall Street Journal or a television network that's going to explode all this out. After all, where did all the social media come? It didn't even exist through most of my life. Instead of all these people being so easily attached to the left, let's have maybe social media. We can stop going to the bad guys and start to going to some of these that are less controlled by the left. But you can't really look around for anybody else. The most important person in turning this around is the guy or gal you see in the mirror in the morning. And that's the great thing about Leadership Institute. It develops leaders, and that's what we need in America, is leaders, not one that just go in and are afraid to do anything, but people who go in. We don't want them necessarily to be rash, but go in with a program and an understanding that this big centralized government system doesn't work, and we've got to find ways to get power back down to where the people actually are, rather than being isolated in Washington, reading the Post every day, which they all do. That's, well, it's up to you, period.
Here's a question from Isaac Hadam. He says, I'm 20 years old and write constitutional articles for local media outlets, and I've done some work in local politics. As a young conservative, what can I do better to bring the message of conservatism to people?
Well, I think you're doing what you should be doing. Writing for different outlets, that's all you can do for find new ways to get out your ideas. I know it's frustrating. That's what I do. I write columns. The main thing I do. It's tough getting them out. But that's the right idea. But keep thinking of new ways to get it out. That's the only kind of information or advice I could give.
This is a question from Theo. He says, do you see a depression coming, or can USA bring back a robust economy in time?
No, I don't see it. Maybe if we had a different president and the Democrats weren't in control of both houses of Congress. The basic problem, though, is that the institutions are failing. The Federal Reserve, which was the star of the progressive movement to run the whole economy, it doesn't work anymore. It's unable to act. It has so much debt weighing it down. And what are we going to do? We're going to pass the $2.1 trillion stimulus, so-called. The last $2 trillion one didn't stimulate, and this one isn't either. What it's going to do is cause enormous problems for the economic system, because of course most of it is borrowed, very very great amounts, trillions. The Federal Reserve didn't have $1 trillion 20 years ago, 1 trillion. Now we're throwing out every year 2, 3, 4, who knows? That just can't last. And we're already in the longest so-called recovery in America, economic recovery, as weak as it is. So at a practical level, I say, be very prudent. Don't take on big debt. There's no reason why you have to get into debt $100,000 to go to college. There are plenty of places you could go that you can learn. Of course, you have to do most of your learning in college outside the university. What I always said, even back in my day, I was the only conservative professor at the University of America in the political science department, and most of the other departments. I always used to say, we conservatives are so lucky. We have to go to college and learn everything on the left, and then we have to go on our own and learn about the right. So we know both sides. They only know one. That's why they have to use slogans and woke theories, and you're guilty, everybody's guilty. They got to throw names because they don't have any understanding what the other side is. We have to understand what the other side's about, because that's what the teaching is. That's what you read in the papers most of the time. So we really are lucky in that sense, that we can see both sides and understand both sides and what's wrong about it. Occasionally something that's right on their side. But that's the challenge.
Here's something from Michael Geary. He says, thank you for all you've done over the years, Don. My first lesson as a young Reaganite was from you. Personnel is policy. It seems the second disruptor president, Trump, never understood this. It seems that at every step, he was sidetracked by staff. Your thoughts?
Well, actually, I agree with that, and Morton Blackwell had a big thing to do about changing that. Morton came to me about 4 years ago, and he said, Don, you know, you really have to update the book on how you run the government the right way. I said, no, I'm in the middle of another book. I'm having to rewrite the whole thing, Morton. I really can't do it. Morton said, you've got to do it. Because they don't have any idea how to run this thing. Oh, he beat me over the head. I went back and got rid of some of the chapters that were really old and made some minor changes. But Morton published the book, and he and I and a whole bunch of other people in Washington tried to get that book into the White House. Finally, one of my friends got it in when they changed the Office of Personnel in the White House to a person who was willing to listen. He didn't have much background in it, but he was willing to listen. And this friend of mine gave it to his assistant. His assistant read it. He gave it to the assistant to the president in charge. The whole Office of Personnel at the White House read the book. They had me in to talk to them about it. The Office of Personnel Management, where I was, the same basic thing happened there. They got that same book and passed it on.
I know, thank you.
All right, that's if we overtime.
We're coming towards the end of my participation. I'm going to have to turn this over to Tiffany, who's prepared to give you some of the other questions that have been typed in. So as I leave, I want to thank you, Don, and let you know that we're going to send you a little present, a token of our appreciation. You'll be getting through the mail a beautiful silk Leadership Institute Adam Smith tie. So I thank you so much, and I turn it over to Tiffany Roberts. Tiffany?
Oh, thank you, Morton, for all you do. You are great.
Hi, all right. So we have time for about one or two more questions. So we have one from Dustin. When you say that modern society has no self-evident truths, does that phrase have implications about the left refusing to believe the original self-evident truth that we are all created equal?
Yeah, that is the center of, just look at our Declaration of Independence, all right? We are endowed by our creator of these rights. If there isn't a creator, how do you get rights? You know, for many years, the philosopher John Locke has been interpreted by people who didn't understand. I wrote an article 45 years ago or so, trying to fight the academic view then that Locke didn't really believe in a creator, didn't believe in he wrote a book called The Reasonableness of Christianity and many other things. But anyway, had a crazy academic theory that tried to justify it. And basically, nothing happened about John Locke's scholarship for about 40 years. And today, even people who aren't religious, aren't moral, professors mostly in England, unfortunately, you know, it's interesting. England has preserved at least an openness to the other side better than America. America is much more ideological. 50 years, 80 years ago, that would not have been true. But they now understand, a Cambridge professor said, you can't understand Locke by understanding he believed in a creator and that all rights flow from that. Now think of this. John Locke is used by the so-called left, the moderate left now, as the founder of rights and responsibility. Well, now, I said it's 50 years ago, but now center philosophy realizes that you can't justify truth without some kind of assumptions like that. The atheist, John Gray, also English, says that it's a whole idea of rights is a superstition taken from Christianity. I mean, this is from an atheist. And there are some lights like this. Maybe, England went off in the wrong direction a long time. Maybe they'll come back to these principles before we will. But I hope we're first.
All right, well, that's all the time we have for today. Don, thank you so much for joining us for this WWCB. And I'd like to welcome everybody else to join us for our next WWCB virtual. That'll be on March 3rd, Wednesday, of course. And feel free to RSVP online at leadershipinstitute.org/breakfast. But thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thank you, Don, again. And I hope you all have a great, wonderful day.
Thank you, too, and have a great time.
Thanks so much for watching this video. To watch our latest video, click here. And to make sure you don't miss any future videos, be sure to subscribe.